Hello, welcome to this session of OpenMentor.net. In this session we are going to see VBScript subroutines. Let us have a look at this code. We have an integer input box getting from the user. So this is an input from the user. Now I have got a variable f equal to 1 to calculate the factorial for I equal to 1 to n, the given number. We are multiplying f is equal to f star, the loop counter. Then finally we are printing factorial of n is that f number. Let us execute this. This is a simple input by the user, a loop, and then it prints that factorial. Now let us execute. It's asking a number. Let me enter 4. So 4 factorial is 24. 1 into 2 into 3 into 4, which is 24. So this works fine. This is just one piece of code. Now I want to use the same thing, the same set of code, this particular code. What should I do? Should I cut and paste this whole code whenever I need it? There is no need. You don't have to cut and paste a section of code. Here it is only 4 or 5 lines. But in real programming, you may have to use hundreds of lines repeatedly in multiple places. In that case, what you need to do is, you need to create a reusable routine. Reusable routine. This is called subroutine. The syntax for subroutine is sub, then at the end sub. Now you need to give a name for the subroutine. Let us give a name factorial. And I want to pass a parameter. So if you want to pass a parameter, let us say n. Okay, I want to pass the parameter n. Then what I need to do is just copy paste this code underneath that. If you want to exit the subroutine like a return statement, you can say exit sub. In this case, since the next statement is n sub, this exit sub is implicit. So in case I want to exit out of this place, I can always say if n is less than or equal to 0, then I would say MSG box no factorial, and then I would say exit sub. So if you want to exit in between, you can use exit sub. At the last statement also, it's a good practice to use exit sub so that you know you are coming out of that subroutine. So this is a subroutine starting with this statement, ending with this statement. It has one parameter. This is typically like maths procedure, f of x comma y. Okay, there can be multiple parameters. Here I am just passing one parameter. Now when I want to, instead of n, I am getting into a variable a. Let me call the factorial value. Okay, so how do I get this factorial? Okay, so how do I get this factorial? Now instead of putting this one, I am putting the message inside this subroutine. Factorial of n is f. So a input box give a number. I would say factorial of a. I pass this. Okay, now let us execute this function. It's asking me a number. Now I'm giving 4. It says factorial of 4 is 24. The effect is exactly the same. Previously I had this portion, the body of this routine, pasted here. But what is the advantage? Now I want to calculate for another number. Okay, for b, assume that I have to use it in maybe there are many lines in between. I have to use the same routine once again. At that point of time, all you need to do is just call this factorial b. Okay, now let us execute this. Now it says expected identifier line number 20. Let us check that. What is that issue. Okay, this is, I have put this dot 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 dot, ideally it should have been a comment, that's why he's giving that error. Now let us execute. It's asking me the first call. I'm giving number 5, factorial of 5 is 120. Now it is asking me again, I give 6. So factorial of 6 is 720. I have calculated the factorial of 2 numbers, but I have not used this code 2 times. All I did is, we have defined the subroutine once. Then we just called it 2 times. So you can call it any number of times. So this is called reusability of the code. Since this whole thing looks like a block, this is like a modular programming. So if your programs are divided into small subroutines, then it is easy for you to read, understand, and then further maintain those subroutines. So it helps you in reusability, it helps you in modularity, it helps you in maintenance. So define once, call it anywhere you want. So this is the basic use of subroutine. Now let us have a look at it in a different fashion. I want to have a different parameter, a different set of parameters, say A, B, C. Right now we are passing only one parameter. I want to have a few other parameters also passed. So how will we do that? Here I am just printing the value. I want to get a return value also. So how do I do that? Let us take it as a next step. Now look at this. I have defined 2 parameters, n, f. What I want to do is, I will pass n from the caller. I will get the return value through this factorial f variable. So this is another parameter. So n is a parameter, f is a parameter. Now look at here. I got the input from the user. I am calling factorial of a comma b. That means a I am passing. I will get the value back from the subroutine in b. Then I am printing that b over here. Let us execute this. Now when I execute this, it's giving me an error. Line number 18 cannot use parentheses while calling a sub. Previously also we have used, but it was just only one parameter. When there are multiple parameters, what you need to do is, let us do this. Okay. Now it says expected end of statement. There is a call. So when we did the call, it was giving a syntax error. Let us find out why it is giving the error. Look at this. When I had used only one parameter, he was accepting these braces. When I used 2 parameters, he didn't like it. But I introduced a new keyword called call, C-A-L-L. Call this subroutine within brackets these 2 parameters. Now let me start using it. Now he is working fine without any issues. I pass 6. The 6 is passed. The factorial is calculated in f. It is returned back. That is assigned to b. Now it is calculating the value correct. If you look at the flow, I get the input, assign it to a. I call this subroutine with a and b. b corresponds to f. This subroutine calculates the value of the factorial in the variable f. When I come back, b holds the value of f. So this is how it happens. Now the flow in one variable I am using as an input parameter. In one variable I am using it as output parameter. Okay. So a is input to the subroutine, b is output from the subroutine. Now you need to be careful whenever you are dealing with subroutines, especially with parameters. Right now let me show you something. I pass a. You know what is the value of a. Now let me print this value of a. MSG box value of a. Okay. Anyway, we are getting the value in b. What I'm going to do is, inside the subroutine, I am going to change n is equal to n star 5. I'm just modifying this n. Purposefully I am modifying this value of n. I assume a is an input parameter, but when a comes over here, it takes the value of n. Then I am modifying n. Let us look at Inside this subroutine, n will have a different value. When it comes to the caller, let us see, because a and n are in the same position, let us see what is the value of a in this case. So let us execute. Now the value of a is 5. I am giving factorial, it gets calculated. Now value of a is 25. How come? I gave the value only 5, but it returns 25 because a corresponds to n and I am modifying n inside the procedure. So always by default in VBScript, by default it is call by reference. So if you modify a value inside the subroutine, it modifies the value in the caller also. So if you want to ensure that it should not modify the value, then you need to use a keyword called byval. Use this byval. Once you use this byval, even though I modify n here, now you will see a difference. Let us execute this once again. Now I'm executing. I pass 5. Factorial of 5 is 120. Value of a remains as 5. So if you don't specify this byval, whatever you modify here, it will reflect in the caller also. If you specify this byval, whatever you do inside this as a modification, it will not affect the caller at all. So by default in VBScript, it is called by reference. The values get changed in the caller. This is subroutine. This is like f of x comma y. If you look at this mathematics f of x comma y, this subroutine also looks like two parameters. One is an input parameter, one is the output parameter. Now I want to modify the same thing to have a different way, like y equal to f of x, left hand side equal to function of x. How will I do that? That is where you will go for functions. Functions and subroutines are pretty similar, except subroutines don't return a value on the left hand side. While calling, I call the subroutine, it doesn't have a LHS, left hand side. Whereas if you see here, input box is a function. Input box returns something and you have to assign it to LHS, left hand side variable. Same way, if I want to do factorial also, like b equal to factorial of a, rather than subroutine, I have to use functions. Let us see how to use this as a function. Now look at this code. The same subroutine code, I just modified it. A function is also a modular way of programming, but it will have left hand side equal to function. Y is equal to f of x, mathematical notation. Instead of sub end sub, I use function end function. Instead of exit sub, I use exit function. Very simple differences between function and subroutine. Parameters are exactly the same. Now I am doing something over here. I calculate the factorial. Then look at this. I am assigning that f to the name of the function itself. The name of the function is factorial. So if you want to return a value, what you need to do is, after doing all the process, function name equal to whatever value you want to return. This is very similar to, in C you will have something like return of f, right? So this is very similar to returning the value f, but the syntax is that function name equal to the return value. So whenever the n is less than or equal to 0, I will return factorial equal to 0, and then I put a message box no factorial. Okay. So in a function, before exiting the function, you need to assign a value to that function name itself. While calling, for a subroutine you use call, whereas for a function you use a variable equal to that function name within brackets parameters. Now let us execute this. Let me give 5 as an input. Factorial of 5 is 120. Effect is exactly the same. Whether you give subroutine or a function, it is exactly the same. Now let me do the same thing. I give 0. Okay. Now there is no factorial for 0. The factorial is 0. So it is executing this path. So what you need to do is, before exiting the function, you need to assign a value to that function name itself. So both function and subroutine are used for modular programming. reusability by passing parameters. But in subroutine, you don't have a left-hand side. In a function, you have a left-hand side equal to function name within brackets parameters. This is heavily used in all modular programming because define once, call it anywhere, any number of times that you want with proper parameters. With this, we end this session. Thank you.